we all deserve a shot at a better life so we can stop living paycheck to paycheck, right? And budgets, as they say, are a reflection of our values. So we should fund the things that our communities need. Now is not the time to shy away from fully funding the future our families need, right? And so when we fund the things like healthcare, higher education, housing, we will inevitably build stronger communities out of this crisis.
I think that the United States spends a lot of money on programs that do not actually help the poor, but are marketed as helping the poor. A large share of Social Security and Medicare spending goes to people who are actually earn over $100,000 a year, that saved enough, that were high income during their lives, have enough in their private savings, yet the government is subsidizing them to the tunes of tens of thousands of dollars a year each. And at the same time, these government programs, the largest share of our budget, are broke, are about to run out of money, and we're gonna get more in debt. We need to be fiscally responsible.
My name is Jesse Barba, Senior Director of External Affairs at Young Invincibles.
My name is Daniel DiMartino. I am a PhD in economics candidate at Columbia University, and I'm originally from Venezuela, and I'm also a senior contributor at Young Voices, an organization that helps young people get in the media and speak for liberty.
As you know, the U.S. economy before COVID worked well for people at the top of this country's wealth distribution, but we know that it's continued to fail the vast majority of American workers, particularly young workers. But we think to find solutions to today's problem, we really have to look back at the outcomes during the recessions of the 1980s and the Great Recession of just 10 years ago, which show a striking similarity. And that's that young people suffered permanent earnings declines over time. And this COVID crisis today has tossed young people yet again into the deepest pits of our current recession. And it's going to take years, if not a generation, to dig out of the debt, lives, and jobs lost. And so we believe there are four critical ways to prepare for an equitable economic future. First is to focus on direct job creation policies. Those look like the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, the Earned Income Tax Credit, and even TANF. The second is don't make food accessibility harder than it already is. We've all seen the food lines during COVID, and during the Great Recession, millions of Americans turned to SNAP to help pay for food. We know today that almost 18% of college students are actually eligible for SNAP, but only 3% actually receive those benefits. We think college students should be treated a little bit better than that. Third, expand access and affordability to healthcare so young people can achieve near 100% universal coverage. And then fourth, making higher education work better for students. We really believe that establishing a federal-state partnership that makes states have skin in the game to address college affordability, and then to also enact student debt cancellation for the 43 million student borrowers can go a long way to getting young people back on their feet.
I think that we need to understand first that the policies that we need to be promoting are those that will lift people at the bottom of the income ladder. And which are those policies? Sometimes it's not the policies that are redistributed. Sometimes it is regulatory barriers. Sometimes it is thinking outside of the box. Sometimes it's trying to get people to where the jobs are. Now with the pandemic, we see a lot of job openings. We actually have the most job openings in US history right now. And at the same time, we have millions of people unemployed that weren't before the pandemic. And one of the reasons is that those job openings are in places where there's not really much unemployment. It is actually in different states. So how do we get the jobs to the people, or how we get the people to the jobs? These are complex questions, and sometimes not everything is about spending money. So that's what I think we need to be focusing on. I think that the United States spends a lot of money on programs that do not actually help the poor, but are marketed as helping the poor. A large share of Social Security and Medicare spending goes to people who are actually earn over $100,000 a year, that saved enough, that were high income during their lives, have enough in their private savings, yet the government is subsidizing them to the tunes of tens of thousands of dollars a year each. And at the same time, these government programs, the largest share of our budget, are broke, are about to run out of money, and we're going to get more in debt. We need to be fiscally responsible, and we don't need necessarily to cut, all the spending, or we need to, pull the rug out of low-income Americans. That's not what we need to do. We actually should be focusing on cutting spending on high-income Americans and making this program more redistributive in that sense. Well, just on the macro sense, if we want to ensure fiscal health for the economy, and we want to balance the budget in the long term, we do need to reform Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And how better? I think that the best way would be to combine all the healthcare government support programs into one single program that only helps low-income Americans. That high-income Americans would not be eligible to take Medicare, would not be eligible for any other program, even Social Security, and only low-income Americans would be allowed to obtain these benefits. That would significantly improve our fiscal outcomes. It will be politically difficult to pass, because the truth is that higher income seniors are a very important constituency, but it is something that need not affect current seniors, but future seniors. On the student part, I do think that the solution is going to be at the high school level. So we need to improve high school education so that all students have better opportunities, not only college students. And how we do this, I think school choice plays a key role in this. And that's a state-based issue, not a federal issue, right? It is states who need to make these reforms.
Right.
And finally, if you want to increase opportunity for other types of careers that do not require a college degree, it is occupational licensing. Right now you need a license in so many states to be a barber. You need a license in the district, Washington, D.C., to be an interior decorator. What are these people do? Who do they think they're protecting? Are they protecting us from orange walls or purple walls, ugly designs? Who cares? Let people work. People have a right to work. And the government is currently imposing so many barriers that affect former felons. I think of the case of firefighters in California, because California forces many of their inmates to work as firefighters when there are fires for free. They basically work for free, and they're forced. Yet, when they get out of jail, even if it was for minor crimes, they are not allowed to become firefighters, even though they have experience as firefighters, forced but experience while they were in jail. So we need to increase opportunities for everybody, especially those who have the least of them. And I think that breaking down these barriers like occupational licenses is the best way to do it.
You and I probably both agree that every American, no matter where they come from or what our background, we all deserve a shot at a better life so we can stop living paycheck to paycheck, right? And budgets, as they say, are a reflection of our values. So we should fund the things that our communities need. Now is not the time to shy away from fully funding the future our families need, right? And so when we fund the things like healthcare, higher education, housing, we will inevitably build stronger communities out of this crisis. And there are certainly some who say that the debt from financing these programs will kill the economy. This assumption certainly argues that rising public debt on one hand is going to crowd out private investment on the other. It may likely, cause an increase in interest rates and spark inflation, which will lead to slower productivity. But when we look at economic modeling and past efforts, again, focusing on the 1980s and even the Great Recession, we know fiscal stimulus in a recession can reduce the risks of economic harm. Spending, in fact, spurs faster recovery. So the bottom line is this: the risks of doing too little during recessions far outweigh any cost of doing too much to help the millions of workers losing their jobs, having their hours slashed, and facing serious economic and health-related hardships. Smart investments focused on helping all people are actually good for the economy, and they can also stimulate the growth. That's a great question. And I think student debt holders are unique in that they span both generational and demographic lines, right? About a third of adults under 30 have student loan debt, but also 1 in 5 people over 50 carry the same debt. We also know demographically, 64% of individuals paying off student debt are white, 17% are Black, and 11% are Latinx. And there are millions of other borrowers that are carrying federal student debt for decades, whether that's 10.5 million borrowers carrying repayment for more than 10 years, or 4.5 million borrowers that have been in repayment for more than 20. But we also know, when you segment it out, that borrowing and default rates are much higher for Black and brown borrowers. For every degree type, borrowers of color are more likely to borrow and to borrow more. So if the goal is to target relief to low income, low wealth borrowers and borrowers of color, the simplest and most equitable way to achieve this is through setting a relief amount. And for us, we believe that amount is $50,000 per student. And if we just peel back a little bit more and think about $50,000 of student loans were eliminated tomorrow, what would happen? That would mean 36 million out of 45 million borrowers, roughly 80%, would have their debt completely wiped. That includes 9.5 million federal student loan borrowers who were either in default or more than 3 months delinquent on their debt at the end of 2019. So again, when we talk about equity, this $50,000 of student debt relief, that would include full cancellation for 85% of Black borrowers and 96% of Latinx borrowers in the lowest income quintile.
What happens if we forgive student debt? Who is going to get the money? It's not going to be people without college degrees. It's going to be people with college degrees or who at least went to college for a few years. Mm-hmm. Especially it's going to go to people with professional degrees, doctors, lawyers, people with MBAs who make over $100,000, $200,000, $500,000 a year. The stimulus checks, on the other hand, at least went to everybody regardless of their education. So people who only graduated high school or who were high school dropouts still got money. Student debt forgiveness does not help any of those people. And those are the people who make the least. Those are the people with the highest unemployment rate. And those are the people who long-term in this economy, we need to help. So I do not agree at all with student debt forgiveness. I think it is expensive. It does not help the people that we seek to help. And it won't solve any problem either. They're just going to get in debt in the future, and we're going to have to forgive debt again in 50 years. And then when you compare this to other countries, Sweden does not have tuition for their public colleges. Yet college graduates from Sweden graduate with on average with higher student debt than American college graduates. Why? Because why would they get in debt, you would think, if they don't have to pay for tuition? Mm-hmm. Because the debt doesn't go to tuition in most of the cases. It goes to paying for housing because they don't want to live with their parents. It goes to paying for other things. And that happens here too. And I think that we need to teach American students that sometimes we need to tighten our belts. Sometimes, I've met people who could have lived with their parents during college and their parents would have been fine, but they wanted the college experience. Yeah. And so they got a student loan for $5,000 in 1 year because they wanted to live on campus rather than 20 minutes away in their parents' homes. Well, why should we, as the taxpayers, why should a high school dropout that chose not to go to college or couldn't go to college pay for those, in all fairness, luxurious decisions that some people make? I don't think it's fair, and I don't think it's good for the economy either. The problem is that, when you're 17, when you're 18 years old, making these things, it's difficult. And so I do think that parents play a central role. The federal government also plays a central role, even though we focus on it too much, because by subsidizing student loans, people think that it is private lenders or that it is banks that are greedy. 90% of student loans are backed and issued by the federal government. This is not a private bank. It's not Bank of America. This is the United States federal government. Yeah. And why do people take those loans? Because the government has allowed for everybody to just take incredible amounts of debt. Perhaps the government should limit much more the amounts of debt that people can take. Perhaps it should be more market-based so that it's not as cheap to get in debt, and only the degrees that actually do pay off can get in debt. And so these are reforms. This is some people don't like this word, but this is a kind of privatization of student loans that would help us reduce the problem long term, right? So that people who do not need to get in debt don't get in debt. Now, somebody might come and say, well, Daniel, but this means that fewer people will go to college. Well, but some people who are currently going to college are not graduating. And it would have been better off if those people hadn't gone to college in the first place, because they're not getting paid off because they didn't complete the degree and they got into a lot of debt. So we need to do two things. Some people whose degrees will not pay off either need to choose different degrees, either need to complete their degrees. So we need to help them through in college to complete them, or some of them may not need to go to college and may need to pursue different career paths, or they just may need to take a year break after high school and try to think, and then perhaps they'll, be more mature to make that very life-changing decision.
First things first, Young Invincibles, we're a national nonprofit that also works across 5 states: California, Colorado, Illinois, Texas, and in New York. And one of the most important things that we do is amplify the voices of young people through storytelling. Storytelling is really what makes Young Invincibles unique. We have the ability to connect directly with real young people and elevate the stories of young people that don't get told enough. And so we do this, by putting young people in the driver's seat to design and advocate for policy solutions they need to thrive. And again, we know that this COVID-19 recession is going to just put young people further in a crisis. And so we believe putting them at the table where decisions are made is the most important thing to solving the growing inequity in this country.